Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. How are you doing?
So last I was telling Anton just a moment ago, I guess, just suggesting as I text you just now, hang on a second, let me take off the recording.
Like, I'm not the repository. I've had partners go out and there was a roti food truck downtown, literally come down to 2 floors to tell me, oh, I got roti today. I'm like, okay, So it is a very interesting experience. But again, I think that part of it is, that you navigate differently, and how people see you navigating is different depending on whether you're in the Black or the white community. And I recognize the privilege with which I move through the world.
Okay, so let me expand on that then. So if you recognize the privilege in the corporate realm, so I recognize that, but what about when I used to have to travel a lot, or when you would go out more in a relaxing setting, do you find yourself having to maintain, do you have a dual personality? So one way you are when you're in a corporate only and very protective, like is there a time when you're able to let down your guard to a certain extent, or you always are mindful?
But see, and that's my whole point. My whole point was that I know how to code switch and I can code switch, but I don't have a guard that I let down. Like this is who I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Which is why I sometimes get the backlash within the community, because I just have never, again, I've, never spoken. I can do it. And in fact, but that's not the way I spoke at home. That's not the way you know what I'm saying? Like
Absolutely.
it
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's very, why it's interesting to me, growing up, first of all, I was not allowed to speak. Then we had and taught them. I always that was not even it just wasn't done. And so I think as Blacks, we are to a certain extent, I don't know if it's my personal background or based upon I don't know, is why we are so aware of. By the way, Ian and Annika, I want to welcome you guys all. We are still going forward. We're having a little bit of a challenge. Trudy's had some car trip issues, so we're waiting her to come on board. But welcome, Ian, and I see an Annika as well. I don't know if that's the case. I'll say for me personally, I've definitely had challenges, and it's not because my personality is different, but I definitely have a side that I do not and will not expose to colleagues at work. The reason why, because of perception and how they say things. Like you mentioned, when you went downstairs as an example, and they're coming, someone bring down and tell you they went and bought roti. I've had days where I will be at work and it'll be a casual day, and they'll say, "Well, Anton, shouldn't you be wearing your hat backwards?" And I'm like, "What?" Or it's just same foolishness that if you give them a little bit, get them too comfortable, like you want to be comfortable and enjoying and seeing, but I don't want it to be you're the unique difference, and to a certain extent. How's anyone else exposure to that? Like, is it anyone else had a scenario where they've seen some real challenges from their work life to their personal life to even their social life, even with work colleagues? Anyone else have any exposure to that?
I don't. So I didn't have, I expect or look at my workplace as a friendship pool. So, my work colleagues were my work colleagues. And so there were boundaries that I set around interactions, social interactions with them. That's probably not the best way to go through life, though.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've always said I don't go to work to beg a friend. But to a certain extent, there has to be a little bit of socialization. I.e., when I'm flying over to Paris, so I'm in the plane for 9 hours. It's just you and work colleagues, so that's all you're there. You have to socialize to a certain extent. In those scenarios, it's not like you're begging a friend, but you're in close proximity. They're sharing. Culture is very different, where some appear to share very freely, and that was never part of my makeup one way or the other. And I just find it different because, well, I just find it different, and I don't know if it was just me. I don't think so. But I was telling Ross earlier on, when I would, I would see two different types. I always found two different types of individuals out there. When you go to large events, whether it's it's a corporate, or you're negotiating, or it's a conference, you'd pass and you see very few, huge members there. And when you do, you'd either see the ones that would, as you pass by them, you give them the little hi, the acknowledgement, and ones that pretend like you don't even exist. And I think that mentality is born out of the recognizing the dualism and trying to pretend like they don't exist, or they want to do so much so that they are viewed just like the others. Does that make sense?
I always do the acknowledgement and find that other Black person in the room.
Telling you, not everyone's like that, man.
Always.
I don't understand it, but there is definitely those that will sit down there and say, they will ignore, like, you give them, what's up, how you doing, man, and I'm happy.
I will share an experience that I had that was disheartening for me.
Mhm.
As you know, law students go through, they summer, then they article, then they get hired on. And I'm at a Bay Street firm, one of a handful of Black partners on Bay Street. And I'm sitting in my office one day, and I see, because they come in, they get interviewed, they walk through and get introduced to people. And I see somebody comes to my office saying, I'd like to introduce you to X. And X was a Black student who was interviewing at my firm. I'm the only, at the time, certainly the only Black, at the time, in fact, the only Black lawyer at the firm. And at no point did that person pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm coming to interview at your firm, which would have made such a huge difference in terms of me being able to share with them the firm culture, how to prepare, what works. I mean, and I think that, that hesitation about whether people want to identify as Black and sort of what, trying to, fit in by not, I mean, call me, look for each other, help each other. Like I went and so after the whole thing's done, I actually called the person up and said, how could you not have, I said, well, I didn't know how you would feel about me reaching out, saying, just make the outreach. I cannot think of one instance in my professional career where I've reached out to someone and they have completely shut me down.
Donna, that is a phenomenal testimony, but I promise you that's not universal. I promise you that is absolutely not universal. I have definitely had the opposite, for sure. Been with scenarios, and you know what? You reach out, listen, I'm glad to see you're there. Can you tell me a little bit about that to give me some insight? Just trying to weigh it out, and very cold, very distant, very, that's not the way we do it here. If you'd like some information, you can call HR. So I think that how did you package it? You packaged it, let me try if I can quote you now. It was I liked it. Your aesthetic ease might have helped your scenario along the way in that way. But I tell you that's not universal. Has anyone else found that experience where they sat down there and they've had resistance, or not resistance, or non-acknowledgement with others within the community? We know them or don't know them. Anyway, what's been
I
the
had that experience, Anton, with when I was applying to law school. I contacted Dean Westmoreland, who was the dean at Windsor University at the time. And I thought, maybe she can just give me some insight, one Black woman to another. Maybe she thought it was a conflict, but I just wanted to get some information. And, I introduced myself and, I told her I'm a Black student looking to apply. And I just, if she can just give me some guidance. And she said, hang on a minute. And then she transferred me to somebody else. And she didn't even, let me know that she was going to transfer me to speak to someone else. She just said, hang on. And next thing I knew, someone else was on the phone. And I thought, wow, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah. It hurts, as mentioned. So for me, part of my challenge is.
So can I just say to Marcia, please, I hope
Yes.
I hope that experience did not discourage you.
Oh,
Because
no, yeah, I should follow
okay.
up. Yes. I did end up going to law school. I finished that article. Yes, I should have followed up by that. Yeah. But I always remember
but
it.
even more broadly, I hope that
Right.
it didn't discourage you from reaching out. And let me say one other thing. One of the, and I apologize that this is all legal, even though I again now no longer practice. But one of the things that we as a community, I think, have ingrained, whether it's I don't know if it's Caribbean, whether I don't know what it is, but this rugged individualism, the feeling that we have to do everything ourselves, and that reaching out and saying, I don't know, or can you help, is a sign of weakness or whatever the case may be. And I see it with lawyers where people will call me, again, because of my practice area, which was very specialized. White lawyers from all over call me and say, hey, I've got this. Can you help me figure, how does this work? No, they will feel no way about calling me. Whereas there was more of a reticence, I found, for Black lawyers to do the same thing, to just say, hey, I know this is what you do. Can you help me with this part of whatever it is that I'm working on? And, again, I hope that your experience has been that the Black legal community has been more welcoming than your first interaction.
They have been. I would have to say, Tanya Walker, just, to throw out a name, she's been fantastic. As well as Shanika Taylor, I believe is her last name. Yeah, so it hasn't all been bad, but I just remember that experience with the dean. And I thought, oh my goodness, at least say, I apologize, I can't assist you. Let me hand you over to someone that could. She just said, yeah, can you hang on a moment? And that was it. So it's gotten better though after that experience.
So going forward so Donna, so for example, you have been very receptive in that way and very accommodating. I'll say me personally, I've done so, but to my own detriment. Whereas because I think there is a perception out there that if our people does wrong, it's reflected on us. And so therefore, because of that, I guess they don't want an association with someone that could possibly tarnish their individualistic perception. So I think it's more based upon, I'm solely focused on me, one, and anything I don't want to be perceived as getting involved in the skirmish. I'm not getting involved in politics or, the Black Lives Matter. I think it's that mentality. I don't know. I don't know. What do you teach your kids in order to make a change? What do you teach yours? Or does anyone else teach our kids? And here, I actually want to segue that to something else, but I want to hear anyone's response to that. Because here was a question that I came about last year. We had an event at our church and we were bringing in, this is when they were talking about what's happening in the Black community, particularly in the southern states, and the police. And the question is, and it's a controversial one, the question was basically this: what do you teach your son? Do you teach your son when he's pulled over by the police? Do you teach him how to acquiesce and to curtail to the police? Or do you teach him to stand up for his rights? I'm curious of the feedback, because I heard a variance. I have a variance of response, but I'm curious to see what do you or what would you teach your child, particularly Black male?
My son is only 9 years old.
Yeah.
For right now, but what I'm trying to get him to do is to use his head, think. You learn to use proper judgment. Be aware of your surroundings, understand what's going on around you at all times, not just from a visual standpoint, but feel it, understand the situations that you're in, and figure out how you deal with it based on what you're being faced with.
Okay, I'm gonna shut down.
You can't necessarily train
Okay.
that type of behavior into a child.
Mhm.
What you can do is train them how to think through certain situations for, to achieve the outcome that is most favorable for everybody involved.
Well, let me ask it more specifically. Assuming we as a people, we're here because we want better for our community. Hence why we're even part of this organization. And it's not just, we got to think transitionally. We were just talking about from a work perspective, what is our experience like at work? Well, in order to even get to work, you have to live life. And to a certain extent, change is never given up by those who are oppressed. It's got to be fought for and captured by those that are being oppressed. That was a quote I remember growing up. In the Black community, when you see the shootings and the problems, and oftentimes it's not, you said you're thinking and be aware what's happening around you. Well, when you're doing, i.e. your son is driving, and doing absolutely nothing wrong, how do we achieve change, progression, or growth if, for example, we're teaching them when you get pulled over, regardless of what they do, regardless of how they act, acquiesce and just play calm? Or, because in psychology, NLP is a funny thing. And what it actually teaches, if you teach your child that, you're teaching that it's okay to recognize yourself as a second-class individual. Is that what you're teaching them? Or are you teaching them to survive? And if you are doing that, are you simultaneously teaching them to perpetuate the challenge we're having right now?
I don't have sons, so parenting is easier for me. Let me recount a recent situation. And this is with the Ahmaud situation. And I hope she doesn't mind me telling this story. Well, okay, someone I know. Someone I know. Her son. She has sons, and one of her sons goes to private school, and one of the a fairly elite private school. And one of the mothers called her up. She had posted something about the Ahmaud Arbery situation. I think it's I Run with Maud or one of those two. And one of the mothers from the school called her, took the time to pick up her phone to call her and say, I feel really sick about this, but don't worry. Your boys are too beautiful to ever be mistaken for criminals. And so this friend of mine reached out to me and said, there are very few times in my life that I am speechless, but I was speechless about how tone deaf and how unaware people are that it has nothing to do with the way that, and this is a roundabout way of answering your question, Anton, believe it or not, with how you look.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with socioeconomic status, because I can tell you people here who live in Rosedale whose sons get pulled over
100%.
driving while black. It
Mhm.
has nothing to do with what you've been taught at home. And so I don't have sons, so I cannot speak about this from a position of knowledge or personal experience,
Mhm.
but I suspect that what I would be teaching them is come home alive before you come home right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You see, Donna, so hear this. My experience is different. So when I went to school in the States, there was countless times that, again, even worse when I came back to Canada, countless times that I was pulled over. I lived in Streetsville, pulled over, driving home. I mean, literally 200 meters from my house. What am I doing in this neighborhood? How did I buy this car? Is there drugs in this car? Do you mind if we stop and search your car? I said, well, no. They said, well, or you have something to hide. Just being harassed. Nothing to do with what I did. Nothing to do with what I looked. Nothing to do with based upon behavior. And it concerns me because, yes, I filed complaints. And yes, I brought in lawyers. And yes, I did a lot of those stuff. But one, those stuff are expensive. Bringing in lawyers all the time cost. Two, it's a pain. It's so far beyond. But three, the more that I sat down and I debate, the more that we acquiesce and keep going in and giving them in, is to a certain extent, it almost feels like we're giving liberty. And yes, it's easier for us, but what about those behind? You know, I'm still hearing a lot of kids within my community. I'm old now, so I don't get harassed or pulled over anymore for that type of foolishness. But they're going through the same stuff I went through. And the hope would have been that by now, it would have changed. You know, if all we're doing is teaching them, you know, just come home alive, just come home alive, come home alive, that feeds perfectly into the oppressor's mentality over us. They know they can do whatever they want. You know, you understand? Like, I totally get it. Don't get twisted. I have a son. I don't want nothing to happen to him. I tell him by all means, do not be coming in. You're no one's bad man. You're not, none of that. But to a certain extent, you need to know your rights to a certain extent. Can they search your car? No, they can't search your car. You know what? Can they detain you? No. You want to speak to your father. You want to speak to your mother. You want a representation. We have to teach them, I think, certain basics without being rude, confrontational, but just enough to know that, listen, make them second guess what they're doing so it doesn't go so far. And maybe I'm biased. I am. I guess I'm frustrated by a lot of stuff. I just see it over and over and over and over again. I may be biased. Any other thoughts? Oh, I guess it's just me. Yeah.
No, I think you know it's a difficult one
Yeah.
because I can't say.
Ross, you're cutting in and out, Ross. We can barely hear you.
Oh, is it better now?
A little bit. Still kind
Yeah.
of.
I don't know. It's just not. Anyway, so I think you know, I personally lean to what Donna is. I prefer my kids or her ride home or be, you know, then be right? And I think change has to come, but I think you got to pick your battles.
Yeah.
You got to pick your battles, and I think that's some of the things that we tend not to do. We tend to fight every angle for every last battle, every last war. But we gotta really, as a community, from my perspective, choose what is more important and start there.
Interesting perspective. You know, I think your mentality is common. I think we all have it to a certain extent because, for example, I don't think anyone's on here going to say, listen, yeah, I don't care. My child is going to stand up for what's right and they're going to die. No. But then if we're going to go to that position, take that position, just come home safe, that's fine. And I certainly, to a certain extent, I do the same thing. What are we going to do as a people to also help change that scenario? Because if we don't do something in addition to that, it's going to maintain for our grandkids are going to go through the same thing.
But Anton, so you asked about a very specific situation. You asked about an interaction with the police.
Yes.
And they have guns and absolute authority at a certain point. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I mean, how much do you challenge when you're crossing the border, talking about land crossing, and you have got the border official guy asking all sorts of, because I mean, I've gotten the whole thing.
Yeah.
Whose car is this? What do you do for a living? I'm like, what does that have to do with me? You know, I mean, am I challenging border? No, because he at that in that interaction, border guard has unfettered discretion to do whatever he wants. Take apart my car, deny me entry into the U.S. Do I teach my kids? You know what? Sure, they're going to be ignorant. Answer the questions.
Absolutely.
And
correct.
Get through the border. Do I also teach my kids, though, and this I can speak to be absolutely clear in asserting your rights, your space in the world outside of those interactions? Also, 100% yes. You're not satisfied with the service that you get, you feel that you're not, absolutely speak up. And they will tell you countless interactions of going out with me saying, excuse me, yeah, I'm next. And also, don't speak to me like that. You know, so again, you asked a very specific question about a very specific interaction.
Yeah.
And if you ask me my parenting advice in that specific interaction, come home alive.
You know,
but if I could just touch on a little thing, there's a difference between dealing with things from an individual standpoint versus dealing with things from a community standpoint. What's the difference between the two, and how do you incorporate one into the other?
well, you know what? That's kind of where I'm going. Donna, you're asking. I went to school down there. Man, they've down to the point where they've taken apart my tires. They let air out of my out of my speakers, air out of my tire. I'm in no way an intimidated looking guy. I'm not intimidating in any shape nor form. I've been harassed, and by all means, the key is the first thing I got to do. I got to make sure that I'm in the correct, that I'm not doing anything wrong. So, and the second of all, when I respond, and this is, I'm telling you, when I teach my kids, when I respond, you respond very distinctly. Yeah, don't go on like you're a bad man. No, none of that foolish. I don't care what your friends are doing. Don't have your hat cock off to the back and all that type of certain ways. But then that's individually. But then the question is, fine, we want them to come home. As a community, as was just mentioned, how do we change that so that, because their friends in other cultures don't have those mentalities. They don't teach that. You don't hear, for example, Indians teaching them, well, make sure you back down, or Chinese back. It's not in other things. So the problem is, well, my concern is this. When we do that, we're teaching them that it's okay to see yourself as not up to what everyone else is.
But Anton, I mean, this conversation is I mean, it's so nuanced, because I'm not suggesting that you get pulled over and they say, get out your car and strip, and you do, because you need to be stripped. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that there's a very nuanced approach to these situations. And it's not always the case that absolute resistance and asserting your rights from the time somebody pulls you over to say, I know I have the right to X. I mean, there's no, there's, why escalate? So I'm not suggesting that you never, and that you acquiesce and you do everything all the time. Mm-hmm. What I am suggesting is that there is a way to deal with those situations. And it's unfortunate, but true, that we have to be even more aware of knowing when it's time to de-escalate.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think you have some, not I think, I know that you have a point. To me, it's just, we as a community, knowing, the key is we know how to de-escalate. I'm just saying, how do we unite to elevate? And that's basically it. How do we elevate so this won't be a problem 2 generations down the road? You know what I mean? Like that's really my own concern, because I agree with you. No, I didn't in any way take what you were saying as, you're going to acquiesce in every scenario. No, that's not how I take it. I've definitely had enough interaction with you to understand how you think and how your kids are. But really, it's my pain. It really is. I sit down there and it hurts me every time I see one of those Facebook posts, and certain, some of them, I'm like, what would I do if that was my child? I don't know. And maybe that's just me. I'm a little bit extra. I don't know. I think survival is ultimately the game that we have to do. We all want our child to come home, but also people, I want us to progress.
But see, now, Anton, you're asking another question again altogether.
Mhm.
Because the answer to what would I do if that were my child is a very different answer for me. Because it's burn all their houses down. Like, don't come for my kid.
Yeah.
So, but that's not the reaction that, because we're in very different places in our lives, and the way that I would respond to something is very different than the way that I would encourage them to respond to something.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, guys, listen, I tell you this, I love the conversation, and I do want to extend this another day, but I'm going to let you guys all go today. Unfortunately, Trudy was unable to come today. We're hoping that she could have got on and we'll have the conversation. We will reschedule it for another day. Donna, I loved your feedback. It was great. Marcia, it was great to hear you as well. And Ross as well.
Thank you.
I appreciate all you guys. I want to thank everyone for coming out and supporting the BBPA as part of the Professional Association. We will reschedule what our conversation was scheduled to be today, and maybe we might even have a day where we talk, we further explore this. Don, I would love to get more of your feedback on this. As I said, I really like where you're going. I do, I'm telling you, I think it's actually great.
Thanks so much, everyone.
But want to thank you guys all for coming. I'll give you a few much time back. But thank you guys for coming through. Definitely stay tuned, and we'll be back again next Tuesday. Ross, I'm not sure if you have a sign up for next week.
Yes. I hope you can hear me better now, guys. Again, we apologize. We apologize for not having Trudy today. I guess life happens. But next Tuesday we will have. You'll be treated to a professional, Debbie Nichols-Skerritt, and she'd be doing something. Your self-care is not an option, and that's next Tuesday. And on Thursday we have Roger Dundas from Canova Media, but also by Blacks. A lot of people should know Roger, and he's going to talk about how to optimize your website. So very, very different topics next week. Of course, our host will be Anton again. Anton, thank you, Karen, for the better part of the 45 minutes and really having an in-depth conversation about our community. And maybe that's something, that's another program that BBPA can do in Let's Chat, right? Having a program called Let's Chat, and we can have these enlightening conversations. So thank you everybody for joining. I apologize again that we couldn't have the talk that we intended to have, but we look forward to seeing you again at the Ask the Professional series. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Have a good day, everybody. Thanks again.